The exile. The galaxy was a place of bright stars, countless civilizations, and endless power struggles. Among them once stood humanity, a young species that had only recently stepped into the wider universe. They entered the great Galactic Council with hope, believing they would finally belong among the stars. For a short time there was peace. For a short time humans thought they were respected, but peace in the galaxy never lasted and respect was never freely given. The other races looked down on humanity. They saw humans as reckless, emotional, and dangerous. To the ancient and powerful species of the Council, humanity was nothing but a mistake. Every success of mankind was seen as a threat. Every act of defiance was painted as violence. And in the shadowed halls of the Galactic Council, whispers began to spread. They are not ready. They are too wild. They must be contained before they grow too strong. It began with restrictions. Trade routes were cut. Human colonies were refused support. Offers of technology were taken away. Humanity was being strangled slowly. Still, the humans resisted. They built ships with what little they had. They struggled, but they did not break. That defiance only angered the Council even more. The final betrayal came on a day that would be remembered for centuries. A false accusation was thrown at Earth. A neighboring alien world was destroyed, and the blame was placed on humanity. The evidence was forged, the judgment already decided. Humanity stood before the Council, pleading for justice, demanding truth, but the verdict was already written in cold stone. Humanity is guilty. Humanity is dangerous. Humanity must be banished. And so it was done. The fleets of the Council descended on human worlds. Earth's defenses were torn apart. Colonies were burned. Survivors were gathered and pushed into massive transport ships. Given only what scraps the Council allowed, humanity was forced into the dark edges of the galaxy, to barren planets filled with storms, deserts, and frozen wastes, worlds no one else wanted, worlds where survival was almost impossible. The message was clear. Humanity was not welcome in the galaxy. They would either die slowly in exile, or destroy themselves in the struggle to survive. The Council thought it was the end, but it was not the end. It was the beginning. On those cold and broken worlds, the humans learned lessons no other species dared to face. They learned hunger, pain, and endless labor. They built shelters from ruins. They dug tunnels into frozen mountains to escape storms that lasted for years. They hunted beasts in deserts where even machines could not survive. Children grew up never knowing comfort. Their first memories were of ash and fire. Their first lessons were survival and sacrifice. Every breath they took was earned. Every step they made was a fight. And slowly the weakness burned away. Humanity was becoming something else. Something harder. Something the galaxy had never seen before. In the silence of exile, in the forgotten corners of space, humanity changed. The Council did not see it. The galaxy ignored them. To all others, the exiles were forgotten. But in the shadows, deep in their caves and hidden settlements, humans began to plan. They did not speak of mercy. They did not dream of forgiveness. They whispered only of strength, of unity, and of the day they would rise again. Fathers taught sons not just how to live, but how to fight. Mothers raised daughters not with soft lullabies, but with hard lessons of survival. Families no longer dreamed of peace. They dreamed of power, of vengeance, of a future where no one could ever exile them again. Time passed. Generations rose and fell. The galaxy forgot them completely. But in the cold silence of those harsh planets, humanity did not forget. They remembered the betrayal. They remembered the shame. And they carried that fire in their hearts. There were moments when even the strongest among them questioned if survival was possible. The storms grew worse. The ground gave little food. The people grew weary. Yet every time they came close to breaking, they remembered the Council's words. You are weak. You are dangerous. You do not belong. And every time humanity stood back up, the young grew stronger than the old. The new generations carried eyes that burned with determination. They built tools from scrap. They mined strange minerals from deep under the rocks. They shaped weapons not seen before. And with every invention, they came closer to something greater. It was slow. It was painful. But piece by piece, step by step, the forgotten people began to build again. Not for peace. Not for the galaxy. But for themselves. The exiles of Earth were no longer the desperate survivors the Council had cast away. They were becoming something far more dangerous, and in the silence of space, far from the watching eyes of the galaxy, The first designs of a fleet were drawn, a fleet not built to beg for respect, a fleet not built to defend against insults, a fleet built to strike, a fleet built to rule. The Council had thought they ended humanity. But in truth, they had only forged them in fire, and soon, the galaxy would learn what a mistake that had been. The struggle for survival. The first years of exile were filled with silence, broken only by the sound of storms and the cries of the desperate. The planets given to humanity were cruel, chosen by the Council with cold precision. Some were covered in endless deserts where heat boiled metal and water was rarer than gold. Others were frozen wastelands where night lasted for months and the cold could kill a man in minutes. A few were rocky spheres wrapped in storms so violent that whole cities could vanish overnight. On these worlds, every day was a battle. There were no allies, no trade, no gifts of food or medicine. The Council wanted humanity to starve and vanish, quietly and forgotten. But humanity did not vanish. At first, survival was almost impossible. Settlers fought against hunger, thirst, and sickness. Families broke apart. Graves filled with the names of those who never saw another sunrise. Yet the humans refused to stop breathing. They refused to give the Council their victory. They scavenged every scrap, shaped broken machines into tools, and carved shelters into the unforgiving ground. As the years turned to decades, a new generation was born. These children never saw the green of Earth, never touched the oceans of their old world, and never believed in the myths of comfort their parents spoke of. Their first memories were of ash, ice, and dust. Their games were not of joy, but of survival, racing through tunnels to escape storms, climbing cliffs to fetch water from frozen caves, learning to fight beasts with sharpened steel. What once was misery slowly became normal. What once felt like punishment became training. The humans adapted faster than any race had imagined possible. Across the colonies, whispers began to spread. We were abandoned, but we are not broken. The words carried from frozen mines to desert camps, from storm shelters to underground cities. Humanity was learning to live in the unlivable, and in the eyes of their children, there was something sharper than hope. There was hunger, hunger for strength, hunger for vengeance, hunger for the day when they would no longer kneel. Engineers worked in secret, using rare minerals ripped from deep beneath the hostile ground. At first, they built tools and weapons for survival, suits that could walk through fire, blades that could cut through armored beasts, shields against the raging storms. But slowly, those tools grew into something more. Pieces of broken starships were rebuilt. Engines that once lay in ruins hummed to life again. Small ships were tested in the skies, hidden from alien patrols that laughed at the weak exiles. The galaxy had forgotten them, but humanity had not forgotten the galaxy. On the frozen world of Chiron, children as young as 10 worked beside adults, drilling through mountains of black ice to find the metals within. On the desert world of Talros, families survived by walking miles each day for drops of water, only to return with stone that could be melted into fuel. On the storm world of Rethar, humans built massive underground cities lit by stolen generators, places where thousands trained, studied, and prepared. What the Council believed was punishment became the fire that forged something new, yet it was not without cost. Entire generations perished in silence, their names remembered only in whispered songs. Some colonies vanished entirely, swallowed by storms or destroyed by famine, but humanity had learned from every loss. The dead became teachers, their struggles etched into the minds of the living. One lesson was clear: survival alone was not enough. If they only clung to life, the galaxy would one day crush them again. They needed power, and they needed unity. Leaders rose among the exiles, commanders, builders, visionaries. They carried no crowns, no thrones, but their words were iron. They spoke of strength. They spoke of revenge. They spoke of a future where humanity would never kneel again. The scattered colonies slowly came together, sending secret signals through the dark. Step by step, the exiles began to unite. The galaxy remained blind. Alien scouts passed the barren systems, laughing at the thought of humans hiding in caves. Merchants spread rumors that the species was dying, that soon the exile would end in silence. Even the Council stopped watching, believing their sentence had worked. But within the storm caves, the deserts, and the frozen wastes, a heartbeat was growing louder. Humanity was no longer simply surviving. They were preparing. The children of exile were no longer fragile settlers. They were warriors, engineers, commanders, born in hardship, raised in fire, and hardened in storms. Every breath was earned, every step was tested, and every day they carried the memory of betrayal like a weapon. And in the hidden factories deep under the ice, the first warships of the exiles were being born. They were small, fragile compared to the fleets of the Council, but they were different. They were built not for politics, not for pride, but for survival. Fast, precise, deadly, ships made by hands that had nothing left to lose. The day was coming when the galaxy would hear their name again. The day was coming when the forgotten would return, and the galaxy, unprepared, would tremble. The first retaliation. For centuries, the galaxy forgot about the exiles. Their names were spoken only in mockery. Alien traitors called them beggars of the stars, unworthy to be remembered. Even the Council, once so eager to crush them, stopped sending patrols. To the galaxy, humanity was finished. But in the dark, behind frozen mountains and under stormy skies, something was waiting. The first human fleets were not grand. They were not shining armadas like the Council commanded. They were forged from scavenged wrecks, from metals dug in frozen mines, from engines rebuilt 1,000 times until they screamed with power. They were sharp, fast, and merciless, ships born of exile, built with nothing but will and desperation. And one night, without warning, they appeared. It began with a lonely outpost near the rim. The aliens stationed there laughed at their duty. The humans were nothing, ghosts buried on broken worlds. But then the scanners lit red. Shadows appeared on the edge of space. Before the outpost could signal for help, the first human warship dropped from the void. Its hull was black steel, scarred but unyielding. Its weapons burned brighter than suns, and its crew, the children of exile, moved with a precision no one expected. The outpost did not last an hour, its defenses shattered, its garrison silenced, and when reinforcements arrived, they found nothing but ruins and a single message carved into the wreckage. We have not forgotten. The Council ignored the first attack. They called it luck. They told themselves it was a desperate act of dying people. But then came the second strike, and the third, and the fourth every time the humans moved like ghosts. They struck suddenly and vanished before fleets could respond. Alien supply lines collapsed. Colonies burned. And always the same message remained. The whispers spread faster than light. The exiles live. The humans are back. Fear grew in the Council chambers. Some leaders demanded war. Others begged for negotiation. But the truth was clear. Humanity was no longer weak. They were no longer scattered. They were united, and their eyes were fixed on vengeance. The galaxy watched in shock as reports grew darker. Human fleets were appearing everywhere, striking with a speed that shattered all defenses. Their weapons tore through shields that had once been thought invincible. Their soldiers fought with a fury no one could match. These were not the same humans who once begged for a seat at the Council. These were warriors carved by storms, built by exile, sharpened by pain. Every battle was personal. Every victory was earned in blood. For the first time, the galaxy feared them. Still, the Council underestimated. They believed the humans would burn out, that their strength was limited. They gathered fleets to crush them once more. And when those fleets moved into exile space, they expected an easy victory. What they found instead was horror. The humans did not defend their planets as before. They lured the fleets into storms, into asteroid fields, into deadly traps prepared over decades. Ships that entered exile space never returned. The few survivors spoke of impossible ambushes, of fleets that seemed to rise from nowhere, of enemies who never slept, never feared, and never surrendered. The Council tried to hide the truth. They silenced reports, buried testimonies, and spread lies of human weakness. But lies cannot cover fire forever. Merchants whispered of entire trade routes lost. Soldiers whispered of comrades who vanished without trace, and rulers whispered of shadows drawing closer every day. The humans did not strike blindly. They chose targets with care. They remembered every insult, every betrayal, every world that mocked them, and one by one they erased them from the stars. The galaxy had thought the exiles would die in silence. But now the silence was broken. It was replaced by thunder, the thunder of warships born in exile, the thunder of vengeance carried across the stars. The message was no longer carved in ruins. It was carried on every battlefield, spoken in every alien tongue, feared in every council chamber. Humanity has returned. And this was only the beginning. Rise of the Empire. The first retaliation shook the galaxy, but what followed was far greater. What began as whispers of raiding fleets soon became undeniable truth. Humanity was no longer an outcast struggling to survive. Humanity was rising. On the exile worlds, the hidden factories worked without rest. Entire mountains were hollowed out to forge engines. Oceans were drained to mine the metals below. Generations who had grown up with nothing but hunger now poured their rage into creation. The fleets grew larger, the soldiers grew stronger, and the colonies, once isolated and desperate, became united under a single banner, the banner of the human empire. At first, the galaxy believed this unity could not last. They thought humans would turn on each other, that jealousy and greed would tear them apart. But exile had burned such weakness away. Centuries of shared suffering bound them together tighter than any law or crown. The empire was not built on politics or wealth. It was built on pain, memory, and the unbreakable will never to kneel again. The galaxy soon discovered what that meant. Human fleets began moving not only to strike but to conquer. They reclaimed lost colonies first, raising their flag over places once burned by council fleets. Survivors who had hidden in shadows for decades emerged, weeping as they saw their people return. For the first time since exile, humanity felt whole again, but they did not stop there. They turned outward. Worlds that had mocked them were taken one by one. Outposts that once spat insults now burned in silence. Every conquest was swift, precise, and merciless. Human fleets struck like storms, overwhelming enemies with speed and firepower. No one was prepared. No one had thought the exiles could return with such strength. In the council chambers, panic spread like wildfire. Speeches were made, alliances proposed, fleets promised. But promises mean nothing when fear is stronger than loyalty. Old allies of the council abandoned them, choosing instead to surrender to humanity. They believed bending the knee early would save them. The empire welcomed them, but not as equals. They were given new laws, human laws. They were bound to serve under human commanders. Their worlds became part of the empire, their voices silenced in the shadow of the exile's vengeance. For the first time in history, the galaxy saw what it meant for humanity to rule. And it was not like any empire before. Where alien rulers demanded obedience with empty words, the humans enforced unity with discipline. Where alien fleets relied on ancient traditions, human warships adapted, changed, and grew sharper with every battle. Where alien societies grew lazy in comfort, the empire of man thrived on hardship, always ready for more. The galaxy had built itself on arrogance. Humanity built itself on survival, and survival proved far stronger. Soon, entire sectors fell under human control. Alien leaders who once laughed at the idea of human strength now begged for mercy. Some were spared, forced to serve as proof of the empire's power. Others were erased, their names lost forever, just as they once tried to erase Earth. Still, humanity remembered its origins. The exiled worlds remained sacred. On those cold, storm-racked planets, great monuments were raised, not of gold or jewels, but of black stone carved with the names of the dead. Every soldier swore an oath before those stones, promising that the sacrifices of their ancestors would never be forgotten. And so, with every victory, the empire grew not only in power, but in purpose. It was not just revenge, it was destiny. The galaxy could no longer deny it. Humanity was no longer the forgotten. Humanity was no longer the exile. Humanity was the empire, but with power came fear, and with fear came rebellion. The council, broken and desperate, tried to gather the remaining races into one last alliance. They spoke of stopping the humans before it was too late, before every star bent to their rule. Fleets were raised, vast and shining, filled with ships older than human history itself. The humans saw this and did not flinch. Instead, they welcomed it. For centuries, they had dreamed of the day when the galaxy would finally face them openly. They wanted the council to bring its best. They wanted the challenge. And when the fleets clashed, the stars themselves seemed to tremble. Alien admirals expected an easy victory, believing in the size of their armadas. But they underestimated the Empire's will. Human warships fought with precision, using every weakness, every trap, every lesson learned in exile. Alien formations crumbled. Councils screamed in fear. Whole fleets were reduced to drifting wreckage. The galaxy's last hope was shattered. When the smoke cleared, the humans did not celebrate. They did not laugh or boast. They only moved forward, cold and unyielding, their eyes fixed on the capital of the galaxy itself. The day was coming when the Council would fall. The day was coming when the Empire would no longer need to fight in shadows. The day was coming when the forgotten species would become the masters of the stars. And as the news spread across the galaxy, even in the farthest corners where no human ship had yet traveled, every species whispered the same words with trembling voices. The exiles are the Empire now. Masters of the galaxy, the fall of the Council fleets shook the galaxy to its core. For centuries, the Council had stood as the highest power, ruling with arrogance and certainty. Their fleets were said to be invincible, their laws unquestionable. But now those fleets drifted as shattered wrecks, their laws broken in silence. Humanity had done what no other species dared. They had destroyed the untouchable. The march toward the galactic capital began. World after world fell without a fight. Some surrendered at the first sight of human warships. Others opened their gates, offering tribute in the hope of survival. The Empire did not need to conquer with endless fire anymore. Fear itself became their weapon. The mere rumor of a human fleet sent rulers fleeing into the shadows. Still, there were those who resisted. Ancient species that had once mocked humanity stood on their last strongholds, hoping to stop what they themselves had created. But their resistance was broken by the cold discipline of the exiles. Humanity struck with precision, crushing rebellions in hours where once it might have taken years. At last, the human fleets stood before the capital. It was a shining world, the heart of galactic pride covered in towers of glass and steel, a jewel floating in the void. For thousands of years, it had been a symbol of alien rule. Every law, every command, every betrayal against humanity had been born within its walls. The exiles had returned to claim it. The battle lasted 3 days. The Council threw everything they had left into the skies, wave after wave of desperate fleets. But for every ship that rose, 2 fell. Human warships carved through their enemies. Unstoppable and merciless, cities shook as bombardments lit the skies. Towers that had stood for millennia crumbled into ash. The capital that had once mocked humanity was burning. On the 4th day, silence fell. The last council chambers were stormed. Their leaders were dragged from golden thrones and brought before the commanders of the Empire. Some begged for mercy, their voices trembling. Others shouted defiance to the end. But mercy was not given, and their words meant nothing. The council that once banished humanity was no more, and in its place stood the Empire. A new flag was raised over the capital, a black banner marked with the seal of humanity. Across the galaxy, broadcasts carried the image. On exile worlds, survivors wept. On conquered worlds, rulers knelt. On every starship, soldiers stood in silence as the voice of the Empire declared a new order. We were cast into the void. We were betrayed. We were forgotten. But we endured, we rose. And now we rule. From that day onward, no species dared to call humanity weak. No species dared to mock them as reckless or fragile. The Empire's laws became the laws of the galaxy. Trade, war, peace, all of it passed through human hands. But the Empire was not built on pride alone. It carried the memory of exile like a blade pressed to its throat. Every citizen of the Empire was taught the story of the banishment, the betrayal, the centuries of struggle. Children grew up not with fairy tales but with lessons of storms and ashes. They were told again and again that the galaxy would never forgive strength, that only eternal vigilance would keep humanity alive. The rulers of the Empire did not forget either. They knew that comfort led to weakness and weakness led to chains. So they kept their people sharp. Every generation trained as soldiers. Every colony was fortified. Every fleet was prepared for war, even in times of peace. To the outside, the Empire seemed cold, unyielding, merciless. But within, its people carried pride deeper than any crown. They knew what they had overcome. They knew what they had become. From the ashes of exile, they had built an empire greater than any before. The galaxy had tried to erase them. Instead, it had created something unstoppable. Yet even in victory, whispers remained. Whispers that humanity was not done. They had risen from nothing to conquer everything. And in their eyes, there were always more stars, more systems, more frontiers to claim. For humanity was no longer content to survive. They were no longer content to rule one galaxy. Their destiny was larger. Their hunger was endless. and as the Empire stood over the ruins of the Council, the galaxy trembled again. Not because of what humanity had already done, but because of what they might do next. Once they were exiles. Now they were masters. Tomorrow they might be something even greater, and the stars themselves would bear witness to the rise of the species that could never be broken. Humanity had returned. Humanity commanded the galaxy. Humanity was the Empire,